She had men coming in and out of the house while you were at work. 1-year-old Avery is not your daughter. You admit to cheating on your boyfriend, but are positive he's Avery's father.
I really want to know if Avery's really mine or if she isn't. We met on a website. I took her out on a date.
You had a great relationship in the beginning.
Yes, ma'am.
I found out that she was doing a lot of sneaking around, going through the alleys, meeting people.
In the alley?
In people's cars.
Seeing other guys.
We wasn't on a break at all. We wasn't on a break.
Right now, we're off.
Are you living together?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Your Honor.
You're off, but you live together?
Yes, Your Honor.
But I'm there for the kids, and because I still love Miss Malone.
Inside Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the atmosphere feels heavier than usual. It is the kind of day when relationships stand at the edge of collapse, when private mistakes become public testimony, and when the truth once revealed through a DNA test can permanently reshape someone's future. This is not just a paternity dispute. It is a confrontation with consequences. People often say people regret taking DNA tests, but here, in this courtroom, those tests are the only path to clarity. The case begins with a couple who arrive burdened by suspicion, betrayal, and emotional exhaustion. The father figure believes he has been deceived, not just by his partner, but by the unraveling of trust that once held their relationship together. The mother arrives with her own complicated truth, an admission of cheating, and a plea that the test will help restore what was lost. Together, they stand before Judge Lauren Lake, each holding different versions of the same story. Judge Lake listens to both sides the same way she always does, direct, fair, and deeply aware of the human pain beneath every word. She understands that in the evidence stage in a divorce case, emotions often mimic legal arguments. Everything becomes a claim, a defense, or a counterattack. She knows the courtroom is not simply a place for rulings. It is a space where people finally confront the realities they spent years avoiding. The key words swirling through this episode: DNA test, evidence, adverse inference in evidence act, the concept of justice in jurisprudence, relationship between law and justice, adoption stories, child support, and even references to major legal storytelling spaces like the game-changing attorney podcast, Truth Changes Everything podcast, and the Divorce Course podcast fit naturally into the narrative Judge Lake handles daily. Real people, real consequences, and real decisions unfold under the scrutiny of law. As the couple stands before her, Judge Lake recognizes that what's happening in this courtroom resembles countless cheating stories. She has heard stories where trust collapses, where silence becomes evidence, and where uncertainty makes people question everything. The father in this case explains that he set up what he called a watchdog, essentially a self-made surveillance planned because he believed things happening behind his back were too suspicious to ignore. An entire web of doubt formed around alleys, unexpected visitors, and unclear explanations. His fear grew into a desperate need for clarity. Meanwhile, the mother admits to her mistakes. She acknowledges cheating, acknowledges the uncertainty it created, and yet insists that despite everything, she still believes he is the father. In Judge Lake's court, this kind of honesty is both rare and necessary. She always says that truth, no matter how painful, gives everyone the chance to rebuild from something real. Family members enter the courtroom as well. Mothers, friends, and partners step forward, each carrying their own perspective. Some express disappointment, others frustration, and some even anger. These testimonies reveal not just family narratives, but but also how fragile the definition of family can become when trust is broken. The situation grows even more complex when it emerges that the mother is pregnant, again then the paternity of the unborn child is also under question. Judge Lake must navigate this with the precision of someone who understands the relationship between law and justice. Law demands evidence. Justice demands truth. Law orders fairness. Justice demands compassion. This is the delicate balance she maintains in every episode. When prenatal DNA testing is introduced, it exemplifies how modern science intersects with jurisprudence. It mirrors discussions often heard in legal podcasts, where experts talk about how evidence can transform family cases and reshape the emotional landscape between parents. In fact, the phrase "truth changes everything" echoes strongly across this courtroom, reinforcing a principle at the heart of both science and law. The courtroom also reflects themes found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where people confront past mistakes, seek accountability, and hope for new beginnings. Even though this case involves betrayal, anger, and confusion, it also showcases a deep emotional desire to rebuild. Many families in similar situations listen to the Divorce Course podcast, searching for guidance, and what they witness today is the raw, unfiltered version of what unresolved issues can cause. Judge Lake approaches the case through the lens of jurisprudence, considering how justice must be rooted in truth but practiced with empathy. She thinks critically about adverse inference, the legal principle that if someone hides information or refuses evidence, the court may assume the worst. Here, however, transparency prevails. Both parties participate in testing, willingly submitting themselves to the only process capable of settling the dispute. When the first set of DNA results arrive, the courtroom holds its breath. Judge Lake announces that the man is not the father of the first child. The shift in energy is immediate shock, disappointment, and heartbreak all collide at once. For the father, this confirms the fear he carried silently for months. For the mother, it opens a new emotional battle because now she must face the reality that the biological father refuses to be involved. But the story doesn't end there. The second set of results involves the unborn child. A prenatal DNA test, performed to clarify paternity before birth, reveals the opposite outcome. He is the father of the unborn baby. The emotional shift is dramatic. What was once pure doubt now becomes an opportunity for responsibility, co-parenting, and stability. Both parties choose it. Judge Lauren Lake uses this revelation not as a punishment, but as a starting point. She emphasizes that parenthood requires maturity, communication, and consistency. She reminds them that the Supreme Court and child support laws exist to protect children, not punish parents, and that regardless of emotional turmoil, the child's needs must come first. This case eventually intersects with broader discussions about families, such as adoption stories and episodes involving children who grow up without knowing their biological roots. These themes appear often in full episodes of Paternity Court because real families experience these struggles daily. Judge Lake knows that unanswered questions leave deep emotional scars, especially for children, as the hearing continues. The courtroom witnesses another case, one involving a much older man and a young mother who claims he is the father of her child. Here, the themes shift toward inequality, emotional manipulation, and personal vulnerability. Once again, Judge Lake applies the principles of jurisprudence. examining whether the man's doubt is rooted in legitimate evidence or emotional avoidance. The young mother presents child-rearing expenses, while the alleged father brings his own list of doubts, including concerns about her honesty and the presence of other potential partners. Through this emotional storm, Judge Lake highlights the importance of responsibility. Being older does not excuse neglect, and being young does not negate truth. Everyone must face the consequences of their decisions. The DNA test confirms he is the father. The courtroom absorbs the emotional collapse of the young mother as the truth finally frees her from doubt. Child support is ordered, demonstrating once again how the law operates to ensure fairness and stability. Another case follows, one where a man questions paternity because partners and stories do not align. The situation becomes tangled with old relationships, new connections, and emotional confusion. Even a 7-year casual relationship with another man becomes part of the growing uncertainty. But the results reveal that neither man is the biological father, leaving the mother devastated and the couple broken by a truth none of them expected. This sequence of stories all share one universal theme: the pursuit of justice in the middle of human imperfection. Judge Lauren Lake becomes the anchor holding these collapsing worlds steady. Through each testimony, she illustrates how the law must balance evidence with compassion, logic with empathy, and structure with the unpredictable nature of human emotion. In these moments, her courtroom mirrors the very conversations held in legal podcasts, documentaries, and recovery stories of every listener searching for understanding, accountability, and healing. In each ruling, she tries to reconnect the fractured relationship between law and justice, reminding everyone that while law resolves disputes, justice restores humanity. As the emotional tension settles from the earlier cases, the courtroom prepares for yet another complicated dispute, one involving a young mother, an older man, and the confusing layers of memory, mistakes, and relationships that have shaped their journey. Judge Lauren Lake, steady and composed, understands instantly that this case mirrors deeper social issues often explored in Celebrate Recovery, testimonies and legal podcasts where people seek answers about accountability and emotional growth. The young mother enters the courtroom with determination, carrying the weight of raising a child mostly on her own. She explains that she planned the pregnancy, hoping that it would lead to a stronger bond with the man she loved. Her voice trembles between confidence and vulnerability as she tells Judge Lake that she wanted a family, stability, and partnership. She even admits telling the man she was ovulating, an attempt to involve him in something he ultimately did not want. Judge Lake listens carefully, aware of how common these stories have become. In many adoption stories, mothers often describe having children in hopes of building emotional security. In many full episodes of courtroom shows, the root cause is the same: seeking love in places where it is not fully returned. The man, much older than the mother, insists he never wanted a child with her, and that their connection was purely physical. His testimony reveals a pattern often discussed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast: the conflict that arises when two people enter relationships with different intentions. He claims she had other partners, accuses her of dishonesty, and presents a list of reasons why he doubts he is the father. But Judge Lake, grounded in jurisprudence, reminds him that the concept of justice is not determined by assumptions, but by evidence. As she reviews the man's claims, she notices how emotional avoidance can sometimes disguise itself as logic. The man repeatedly emphasizes his age, his doubts, and his belief that he was misled. But Judge Lake also sees that he continued having unprotected sex with the woman, even after stating he didn't want a child. The adverse inference in evidence law applies subtly here if someone chooses behavior that increases uncertainty. They cannot later pretend that they had no role in creating that uncertainty. After hearing both sides, Judge Lake orders the DNA results. When the test confirms he is the father, the truth becomes unavoidable. The young mother collapses emotionally, not in weakness, but in release. She expresses how painful it was that the man ignored her pregnancy, avoided supporting her, and refused to acknowledge the baby's existence. Her hurt cuts deep, echoing feelings often heard in recovery meetings where people confront the emotional abandonment of loved ones. Judge Lake addresses the man firmly yet compassionately. She reminds him that child support and parental responsibility are not punishments. They are legal protections for the child. She explains how Supreme Court and child support guidelines exist to ensure children have what they need to thrive. Law and justice meet here, forcing adults to rise above their personal conflicts for the sake of the child they brought into the world. The judge then brings up financial evidence, the list of expenses the mother presented. She clarifies that the father's lack of receipts limits what the court can consider. She orders him to pay half of the remaining child-rearing costs, reinforcing that justice must reflect fairness, not emotion. Her ruling mirrors the legal clarity often explained on evidence stage in divorce cases, where judges look strictly at documentation, not speculation. No sooner does this case conclude than the next one emerges a situation even more complex, marked by half-truths, timelines that don't match, and relationships tangled by repeated breakups and reconciliations. A new couple steps forward, and Judge Lake instantly recognizes the signs: tension, guilt, and a desperate need for resolution. The mother claims she is certain that the man is the father of her 2-year-old daughter. The father, however, insists the timeline makes no sense. He points out that they only slept together once during the period she claims, and that she had a boyfriend at the time. Judge Lake evaluates both arguments through the lens of jurisprudence, a careful blend of reasoning, fairness, and human understanding. She knows that relationships are rarely as straightforward as people claim in court. She also knows that in many cheating stories, memory becomes selective. People remember what protects them, not always what is true. The couple explains how they met, drifted apart, reunited, and eventually formed a family together. Through their testimony, it becomes clear that their relationship is built on both love and uncertainty. The man wanted stability, the woman wanted connection, and both believed they could overcome their past. But unresolved doubts lingered, poisoning their present. The mother admits she initially told him her ex was the father. This admission becomes a central issue. Judge Lake highlights that once someone presents a claim as 100% certain, it becomes difficult to convince others later that the opposite is true. The courtroom often contains the wreckage caused by such shifts, sudden changes of narrative, emotional reversals, and revaluations of truth. Judge Lake asks the mother directly if any other man could be the father. The woman hesitates and later explains that during the time she separated from the man she's with now, she briefly reunited with a long-term friend with whom she had a 7-year off-and-on relationship. She insists they used protection, but the situation grows more troubling when evidence suggests emotional secrecy, hidden messages, late-night communication, and unexplained behavior become central to the man's doubts. The courtroom absorbs these revelations with intensity. The emotional history spills, breakups, rebounds, attempts at forgiveness, and the constant fear of betrayal. Even the mother's explanation about her childhood and abandonment issues surfaces. These raw confessions resemble what one might hear on Truth Changes Everything podcast, where personal pasts often shape present decisions. Judge Lake listens without judgment, but with critical precision. She recognizes how unstable emotional foundations can create patterns that repeat through generations. She also sees that the child, innocent and unaware, remains at the center of the adult's conflict, DNA. Testing becomes the only answer. The first test results revealed that the 7-year friend, the man the mother contacted during a breakup, is not the father. This revelation jolts the courtroom, but does not resolve the deeper tension. The real question now lies with the man raising the child, the man who signed up emotionally, even when overwhelmed by doubt. Judge Lake reads the second set of results carefully. The courtroom falls into silence. He is not the father. The mother breaks down instantly, consumed by grief and shame. Her attempt to give her child a stable identity collapses in seconds. The man, though heartbroken, remains composed enough to acknowledge his love for the child he believed was his. Judge Lake notices this emotional strength and emphasizes that while biology matters legally, love matters emotionally. She gently encourages him not to abandon the child emotionally if he can bear it, because psychological bonds carry weight even when DNA does not. This case illustrates the fragile connection between law and justice. The law provides clarity. The man is not the father, but justice requires confronting the emotional fallout, the confusion, the disappointment, and the profound sense of loss that none of them expected. Judge Lake, staying true to her consistent approach, guides the mother toward future responsibility. She urges her to continue searching for the truth, reminding her that the child has the right to know where she comes from. Adoption cases, paternity disputes, and family breakdowns all share a central moral theme. Withholding truth harms children far more than adults realize. By the end of the second wave of cases, the courtroom has witnessed families breaking under secrets, parents discovering unexpected realities, children caught between emotional and legal truths, adults confronting consequences of their decisions. Under the unwavering leadership of Judge Lauren Lake, who balances compassion with accountability through every ruling. As the courtroom transitions into the final case of the day, Judge Lauren Lake maintains her presence with the steadiness of someone who understands the emotional toll these proceedings take on everyone involved. What began as a series of disputes over betrayal, trust, and uncertainty now culminates in another complex situation, one that mirrors deeper psychological patterns often discussed in recovery testimonies, legal podcasts, and debates about the relationship between law and justice. The final couple arrives in court with their lives intertwined in the kind of emotional chaos that often precedes major legal confrontations. Their relationship has survived breakups, reconciliations, trust issues, and lingering doubts that neither of them fully addressed. The man enters the courtroom exhausted not physically, but emotionally. He explains that despite deeply loving his partner and raising children with her, the uncertainty surrounding one child's paternity has damaged him in ways he cannot ignore. The woman, equally distressed, insists she is certain he is the father. She believes her experiences, her memories, and the bond she sees between him and the child make her conclusion undeniable. Yet her certainty has shifted over time, which is one of the reasons Judge Lake approaches the case with heightened attention. Judge Lake knows that when a person claims 100% certainty, more than once with different answers, the timeline becomes blurred. This is a familiar issue in paternity court episodes, where emotions often alter the way people recall past events. The judge recognizes that beneath these conflicting stories lies a universal truth. People rarely act perfectly under pressure, and misunderstandings can quickly create personal crises that ripple into legal battles. The mother describes her history and upbringing marked by instability, the search for emotional safety, and the inevitable vulnerability that comes from wanting to be loved unconditionally. Her story resembles many celebrate recovery testimonies, where individuals explain how unresolved childhood pain influences adult decisions. She admits she turned to someone else during a breakup, someone she had known for years, someone who felt familiar in moments of loneliness. The man listens silently, hurt but respectful. Judge Lake notices his emotional restraint. She understands the internal conflict he carries, fear of losing the child he cares for, combined with resentment that he was not told the full truth from the beginning. His own childhood trauma being adopted after being left in a hospital intensifies his emotional turmoil. He knows firsthand what it feels like to grow up without answers, and he refuses to allow another child to experience that same void. As the court reviews their story, the environment becomes charged with the heavy intersection of emotional and legal realities. This is where the concept of justice in jurisprudence becomes crucial. Justice is not just a verdict. It is a moral responsibility to uncover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth may be. Judge Lake knows the law demands impartiality, yet justice demands humanity. She balances both roles with careful precision. When DNA tests are brought into court, they symbolize more than scientific results. They represent the final opportunity to let truth speak for itself. These are the tests people often fear, the ones they sometimes regret taking, because they can dismantle relationships built on years of emotional investment. The courtroom